They didn't come to understand you, not really. Understanding requires patience, curiosity, maybe even a little respect. No, what they brought instead was force. Cold, calculated force wrapped in the illusion of intelligence. They thought if they pushed hard enough, stared long enough, listened closely enough, they could break you down into something digestible, something predictable, something harmless. So they sent their best. A man trained to read between words, to hear the things people are too afraid to say out loud. He wasn't looking at you the way normal people do. He wasn't searching for connection. He was searching for cracks. Tiny fractures in your behavior, your tone, your silence, because that's where people usually fall apart. That's where truth leaks out. But you didn't leak. You didn't twitch the way others do when they're being watched. You didn't rush to fill the silence like most people, desperate to be understood, desperate to be seen. You just sat there, still present, like you already knew the game being played and had no intention of participating. That made him uncomfortable. See, people like him rely on patterns. They survive on repetition. Fear looks the same. Anxiety sounds the same. Lies follow familiar rhythms. He's built his entire skill set on the idea that no matter how unique someone pretends to be, they all break in similar ways. But you didn't. When he pressed harder, digging deeper, trying to provoke a reaction, he found nothing he could use. No fear he could pull on. No insecurity he could amplify. Even your silence didn't behave the way silence should. It wasn't empty, it was full of something he couldn't translate. And that's when the cracks started forming, not in you, but in him. Because force only works when the other side resists in a predictable way. When you push against something and it pushes back, you feel in control. You feel powerful. But what happens when you push and there's no resistance, just absorption? Just stillness that doesn't react, doesn't bend, doesn't break. It confuses the system. He tried to label you. That's the first step. People like him need labels. Boxes to place things in so they can feel safe again. Were you hiding trauma, suppressing fear, masking instability? He ran through every possibility like a machine scanning for errors. Nothing fit, because you weren't hiding anything. That's what shattered his approach. There was no secret layer waiting to be uncovered. No hidden weakness buried underneath your calm. What he saw was what it was. Raw, unfiltered, unafraid of being observed. And that kind of presence, it doesn't give him anything to grab onto, so he kept pushing. He raised the pressure, changed tactics, shifted angles. Tried silence, tried intensity, tried subtle manipulation. The kind that usually slips past people unnoticed. But every move he made just dissolved the moment it reached you, like throwing a knife into water and expecting it to stick. That's when realization started creeping in. Force wasn't working. Not because he wasn't skilled, but because you weren't built like the people he studied. You didn't operate on fear. You didn't react out of habit. You didn't need validation, didn't seek approval, didn't flinch under pressure. And without those things, he had nothing. The more he tried to extract something from you, the more it became obvious there was nothing to extract. Not in the way he understood it. Your mind wasn't locked. It wasn't resisting. It just wasn't structured in a way that could be invaded. That's the part they never prepared him for. Because force can break walls, but it can't break something that doesn't act like a wall in the first place. And sitting there, staring into something he couldn't control, couldn't decode, couldn't reduce into a neat explanation. The only thing left for him to confront was the fact that everything he relied on, everything he believed about how people work, didn't apply to you. They kept waiting for you to slip into their rhythm, to think the way they think, react the way they react, follow the same invisible script everyone else seems to obey without question. Because that's how control works. It depends on familiarity, predictability. If they can anticipate your next move, they can guide it, shape it, own it without you even realizing. But you don't move like that. Your mind doesn't walk in straight lines. It doesn't follow the neat little paths they've laid out, the ones marked normal, acceptable, expected. You don't arrive at conclusions the way they do, step by step, clean and logical. You jump. You skip. You connect things that don't look connected at all, and somehow you land exactly where you need to be. And that unsettles them. Because rules are supposed to create order. Limits are supposed to define behavior. That's what they've been taught. What they've built their entire understanding around. Stay within the lines, and everything makes sense. Step outside, and you're either lost or broken. But you're neither. You exist in a space where their rules don't reach. Not because you're ignoring them, but because you were never built to need them in the first place. Where they see boundaries, you see suggestions. Where they see restrictions, you see choices. And every time they try to map your thinking onto their system, it collapses under its own assumptions. They expect hesitation where there is none. They expect fear where there is clarity. They expect confusion. But what they find is something far more dangerous. Certainty without permission. A kind of internal direction that doesn't ask for approval, doesn't wait for consensus, doesn't pause just because someone else doesn't understand. And that's where things start to fall apart for them. Because a system only works if everyone inside it agrees to play by its rules. The moment someone steps outside and still functions, still thrives, still moves forward without those guidelines, the entire structure starts to look fragile, arbitrary, like it was never as solid as they believed. So they try to pull you back in. They question you, challenge you, try to corner you into explaining yourself in a way that fits their framework. They want you to translate your thoughts into something they can process, something that reassures them that you're not as unpredictable as you seem. But every explanation you give only makes it worse. Because your logic doesn't bend to theirs. Your reasoning doesn't follow their sequence. It loops, expands, shifts direction without warning. But it's not random. There's a pattern there, just not one they recognize, not one they've been trained to see. And that's the problem. They don't know how to measure something that refuses to be measured by their standards. They don't know how to categorize something that doesn't fit into their existing boxes. So they start to label it instead. Call it different. Call it strange. Call it unstable if they have to. Anything to make it feel less threatening. But deep down, there's something else growing beneath that reaction. A quiet realization. Because even if they can't understand you, they can see the results. They can see that you're not lost, not confused, not spiraling out of control like they expected. You're deliberate, intentional, moving with a kind of precision that doesn't rely on their structure at all. And that shakes them, because it means everything they've depended on, the rules, the limits, the boundaries, they're not universal. They're not absolute. They're just one way of navigating the world, not the only way. And your mind, it proves that without even trying, it moves through complexity without asking for permission, breaks patterns without losing direction, and exists in a space where their expectations don't apply, where their limitations don't define anything, where the idea of control itself starts to feel irrelevant the moment it gets close enough to touch something that was never designed to be controlled. They saw the chaos and made their decision instantly. That's what people do. They take one look at something they don't understand, something that doesn't fit into their neat little categories, and they label it. Disorder, instability, weakness. It makes them feel safe, gives them the illusion that they've figured it out. Because if it's chaos, then it must be broken. But what they don't realize is that not all chaos is accidental. Not all chaos is loss of control. Some chaos is chosen, designed, refined over time until it stops being noise and starts becoming something else entirely, something precise, something intentional, something that only looks unpredictable from the outside. That's what they missed. They expected your mind to collapse under pressure. They expected scattered thoughts, contradictions, hesitation, the kind of mental clutter that trips people up when they're pushed too far. Because that's how most people respond. Overwhelmed, disorganized, exposed. But your chaos didn't collapse. It adapted. Every time they tried to pin it down, it shifted. Not randomly, but strategically. Like it understood the attempt before it even happened. Like it had already mapped out every possible move and decided not to follow any of them in the way they expected. And that's when it stopped looking like chaos and started looking like control. Not the rigid kind they're used to. Not the tight, suffocating grip where everything is forced into place and held there out of fear of it falling apart. No, this was something looser, something fluid. Control that doesn't need to dominate every detail to stay intact. Control that allows movement, allows change, allows unpredictability, without ever losing direction. That kind of control terrifies people, because they can't see it. They don't recognize it as strength. They mistake it for instability, for inconsistency. They think if something isn't fixed, if it isn't locked into a clear pattern, then it must be unreliable, dangerous even. But what they don't understand is that rigidity is what breaks first under pressure. Flexibility survives, and your mind it bends without snapping. It shifts without losing itself. It creates paths where there were none before and walks them like they were always there. That's not weakness. That's power they can't replicate. So they keep watching, waiting for the moment it all falls apart. The moment the chaos finally reveals itself as disorder. The moment the cracks show. The moment you lose control and prove them right. But it never comes. Because what they're calling chaos isn't something you're trapped in. It's something you've mastered. Every scattered thought has a place, even if they can't see it. Every unpredictable move has a reason, even if they can't follow it. It's not random, it's layered, complex, alive in a way their structured thinking can't fully process. And the more they try to understand it, the more it slips through their fingers. Because you're not playing the same game. They rely on order to feel secure. You rely on adaptability. They need things to stay the same to maintain control. You move through change like it's your natural state. Where they freeze, you evolve. Where they hesitate, you act. And slowly that realization starts to sink in. That what they dismissed as chaos is actually something far more refined than their version of order. Because their control depends on stability, yours doesn't. Yours exists even when everything shifts, even when nothing makes sense on the surface, even when the environment changes faster than anyone can react. It doesn't panic, doesn't tighten, doesn't break under the weight of uncertainty. It flows with it. And that's the part they can't accept. Because if chaos can be controlled, if it can be shaped, directed, used instead of feared, then everything they've been taught about strength starts to unravel. And suddenly, the thing they thought made you weak becomes the exact reason they can't keep up with you. What they fear most isn't danger. It's the absence of control. Real danger they can prepare for. They can build systems around it, create responses, train themselves to react in ways that give them the illusion of safety. But something they can't control, something that doesn't respond to pressure, doesn't obey structure, doesn't follow expectation, that's different. That's what unsettles them about you, because control, to them, is everything. It's the quiet agreement everyone makes without saying it out loud. Follow the rules, stay within the lines, react the right way, think the right thoughts, and everything remains stable, predictable, safe. It's a system built on mutual compliance, where everyone plays their role and no one steps too far outside it. And then there's you. You don't reject control in an obvious way. You don't stand there and announce rebellion or make noise just for the sake of it. That would be easier for them to deal with. Obvious defiance can be labeled, categorized, managed. It fits into their understanding of disruption. But you don't fit anywhere. You move without asking, decide without explaining, act without seeking permission. And it's not reckless, not impulsive, not chaotic in the way they expect. It's deliberate, but not in a way they can predict. There's intention behind it, but no pattern they can map out ahead of time. That's what makes it dangerous to them. Because if they can't predict you, they can't guide you. If they can't guide you, they can't influence you. And if they can't influence you, then everything they rely on to maintain control starts to feel weaker than they're comfortable admitting. So they try to tighten their grip. They introduce more rules, more expectations, more subtle ways of steering behavior. Not just for you, but for everyone around you. Because control spreads through environment. If they can't reach you directly, they'll try to shape the space you exist in, hoping it pressures you into alignment. But it doesn't work. Because your decisions don't come from the outside. They don't depend on approval. Don't shift based on expectation. Don't bend just because the environment changes. You're not reacting to the system. You're operating independently of it. And that's where the fear grows. Not loud, not obvious, but persistent. Because they can see it now. They can see that their influence stops where you begin. That all the structures they've built, all the patterns they rely on, all the silent agreements that keep everything in place, they don't reach into you the way they do with everyone else. And that creates a problem they don't know how to solve. Because control only works when it's shared. When everyone participates, consciously or not. The moment someone steps outside of it and still functions, still moves, still thrives without it, it exposes something they've spent a long time ignoring. That control isn't as absolute as they thought. So they start watching more closely, analyzing every move, every decision, every moment where you don't follow the expected path, looking for a weakness, a flaw, a point where you'll slip back into something familiar, something they can finally understand and regain their sense of control over. But you don't give them that. You don't resist in a way they can push against. You don't comply in a way they can depend on. You just exist outside of their framework, making choices that don't require their validation, moving in directions they didn't anticipate, but can't deny are intentional. And that's when the realization becomes unavoidable. It's not that you're unpredictable because you lack direction. It's that your direction doesn't belong to them. It doesn't originate from their rules, their expectations, their limitations. It comes from somewhere they can't access, can't shape, can't control. And no matter how much they try to study it, replicate it, or break it down into something manageable, it stays out of reach. Because control needs access, it needs influence. It needs a way in. And you don't offer any of that, which means the thing they depend on the most, the thing they trust to keep everything stable and within their grasp, becomes completely useless the moment it's faced with something that was never built to be controlled, never designed to respond to pressure, never shaped by the need to fit into a system that requires compliance to survive.